Well, everybody kept talking about this
I
meeting.
didn't
I
like
was like,
it
well, I didn't
either.
see anything from Brian.
Oh my God, it's probably in that email.
Oh my goodness, I didn't go in there.
Yeah. These things
I
not
gotta
on yet, is
remember it.
Yeah.
Wait a minute, give me the name on
You're
it.
live now.
Okay, want to go into order? 7 o'clock. As president, I'm, just for the record, in the TV here or whatever, I'm Jim Persano. Why don't everybody introduce themselves, please?
Michael Parker. Bill Salka.
Kathy Dublin.
Joe Tolisano. Brian Lissinger.
Bud Nor.
Bill Meyer.
Mike Marinaccio.
Great, thank you.
Oh, wait a minute. I
Jim
gotta go
Keeney.
in.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Ted
Go ahead.
Patricia.
Todd Rollins.
Very good, thank you. Okay. Let's, you're all set, Bud. Why don't you give us your presentation on the
All right.
raises and bonuses?
I'd like to thank the Board of Finance for the opportunity to address the controversy surrounding salary administration and to provide the necessary information that was requested at the Board of Finance meeting on July 27th, 2020. The detailed information is contained in the book that each one of you received last week. The information includes the modus operandi of the current budget process, the procedure of awarding annual raises and bonuses, the legal opinion from our town attorney, Carl Andolina, the history of salaries and bonuses since 2015, a timeline of events, conclusions, and recommended internal control improvements. I previously addressed the controversy surrounding the awarding of salary increases and bonuses at the Board of Finance meeting on July 27th, where I outlined the procedure I followed based upon past practices of first selectmen, where they raised their own salaries that were included in the annual approved budgets. Thinking no further action was required, past selectmen did so without the express approval of the Board of Selectmen. I followed this past precedent and awarded myself a salary increase and a bonus. I have retroactively rescinded this increase along with reimbursing the town for the one and only bonus I ever received. It's important to note that the town attorney conducted a review of the salaries in the bonus matter as requested by the Board of Finance, and his conclusion was that there was no violation of laws, state statutes, town charter, town ordinances, or ethics rules that occurred and that questions of impropriety and legality are unfounded. What his review did point out, however, was that there are opportunities to clarify and improve the policies and the procedures regarding salary administration. The Board of Selectmen is currently developing a formal policy and procedure in this regard. This proposed policy will provide greater salary detail to the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance during their annual budget development process. The Board of Selectmen will review and approve all salary-related decisions made by the first Selectman, which will be included in the approved budget presented to the Board of Finance. The legal authority approving the salary line items in the budget rests with the Board of Finance when they vote to accept and approve the Board of Selectmen approved budget. Bonuses. I'd now like to address the issue of bonuses and the implication that there were violations of laws, state statutes, town charter, and ethics rules. As previously stated by the town attorney, there were no such violations in this regard, and the questions of impropriety and legality are unfounded. Further, I took offense in public meetings that ethics rules regarding the situation were violated. I take my oath of my office very seriously. I would do nothing to violate this and or the conduct in my own personal life. Previous public officials that were accused of ethics violations have stated, quote, "Where do I go to get my reputation back?" Unquote. I asked the same question. If certain individuals feel that an ethics violation did occur, then I suggest that they take the appropriate action as was suggested by a Board of Finance member in their July meeting. I can assure this board and the public that I will defend my reputation against these unfounded allegations. There is a documented past practice of the first selectman granting both salary increases and incentive bonus awards without the express approval of the full Board of Selectmen. Employee raises and incentive bonus awards were routinely granted, and allegations questioning the legality are unsupported. From fiscal year 2009 to fiscal year 2019, no such votes were taken by the Selectmen. Bonus awards were granted in fiscal year 2012 through fiscal year 2020, with the exception of fiscal year 2013 and fiscal year 2018. The previous first selectman was granted a bonus in fiscal 2012. In fiscal 2020, the Board of Selectmen approved a motion on June 6, 2019 for the first selectman to review and adjust town employees' salaries for those not elected. The same motion froze the salary for elected officials, namely the first selectman, the town clerk, the registrars, and the stipends for the Board of Selectmen. The bonus payment to the first selectman fell under this motion and should not have been made. It has since been returned as previously stated. It's important to point out that the funding of bonus amounts did not entail any unauthorized appropriation, transfers, or misappropriation of funds. They were funded in an approved salary line item in the fiscal 2020 budget. This line item did not exceed the budget. I want to repeat and stress this critical point since, quote, serious concerns have been raised about the legality of these bonuses, unquote. There is nothing to support claims that any salary information was hidden from elected officials. I repeat with emphasis and the concurrence of the town attorney that the funding of bonus amounts do not entail any authorized appropriation, transfers, or misappropriation of funds. They were funded in an approved salary line in the fiscal 2020 budget, which the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance approved. This line item did not exceed the budget. In 2021, bonus payments have neither been made nor are anticipated. Bonus and incentive awards do have a role in the incentive compensation process. They are a one-time cost that does not increase base pay and are an extremely effective method of acknowledging extraordinary performance over and above one's normal job responsibilities. Such was the case this past year, where an unprecedented series of events associated with the COVID pandemic required the closing of town hall, employees working remotely from home to ensure that town operations continued, and the emergency responses from our frontline EMT, fire, and ALS team that clearly demonstrated and supported the decision to acknowledge these professionals. My experience in business confirms the benefits of this approach as a very effective way to acknowledge extraordinary performance, improve morale, control salary creep and cost, and improve productivity. I would recommend that a discussion of incentive awards and a proper and fair approach to this initiative would benefit the town. Conclusions and recommended internal control improvements. 1. Provide greater salary detail to the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance during annual budget development. This would include a special meeting devoted to salaries and include developing a schedule of salary positions by department at current and proposed rates. 2. Provide a comparison of personal service exhibit comparing prior fiscal years to the proposed budget. 3. Enhance, clarify, and improve the salary administration program section in the employee manual and handbook, and review these changes with the town labor attorney. Number 4, develop a policy, ordinance, or charter revision addressing the administration of compensation. For example, salary bonuses and stipends. For elected officials, reconsider the historical practice of bonus incentives, payments after review with the town attorney. 5, ensure that the Board of Selectmen reviews and approves all salary-related decisions by the first selectman. And finally, number 6, provide the same level of transparency to the Board of Finance. As previously indicated by a concerned Board of Finance member, quote, as elected town leaders, we are given enormous responsibility and trust. We must ensure transparency, accountability, and adherence to applicable laws and regulations for all financial transactions, unquote. I sincerely hope that the Board of Finance will now realize and appreciate that the trust that has existed between the first selectman and the chief financial officer, as demonstrated through numerous years of our involvement, remains inviolate and without question.
Can we ask some questions now?
Absolutely.
Okay, there will be some things I'd like to bring up to the Board of Finance, but I just want to ask you this question. Were all the evaluations completed before you awarded the bonuses?
All the evaluations were completed with the exception of 3. I'm talking about directors. I assume that directors then basically gave their evaluation performances, otherwise the recommendations of salary were based upon that evaluation. The 2 evaluations that did not take place verbally, or took place verbally but not basically in writing, those will be addressed.
I do have some questions if no one else does.
Sure.
Thank you. Well, first I'll say, thank you very much for this packet of materials. I did, read through it many times. I think it was, had a lot of very good financial information that I very much appreciated. I certainly do agree with your proposed reforms and changes and look forward to implementing them with the board. Certainly I have a few other ideas. I'm sure other board members do. But before we move on, I just wanted to clarify a couple of things. And I do respectfully disagree with a couple of assertions that I just wanted some clarifications on. First, do you consider there to be a difference between a salary and a bonus?
Do I consider? Yes, I do.
Okay. So a salary, you think it would be fair to say a salary is a payment for their normal job duties, and a bonus is something above and beyond.
I've already indicated that, Bill. I
Okay.
think bonuses being awarded are a way to compensate employees for those performance that are over and above their normal job requirements or in the extenuating circumstances, as I mentioned with the COVID-19 pandemic.
But the bonus doesn't go to the base.
And that's what I'm saying, Joe, is I think an effective way to take a look at all salary enumeration may be on the basis of bonuses, because it doesn't increase the baseline. It doesn't go on forever. In industry, bonuses were paid based upon the profitability or the performance of that particular corporation. So your salary line doesn't increase, your creep doesn't increase. You may have employees, for example, that are at the top of their salary range. You want to retain them, but by the same token, it's very difficult to pay them over and above their base salary line. So you look at bonuses or incentive payments is probably the best way to describe this as a way to address those situations. So yes, I do consider them to be different.
Okay. And were these bonuses budgeted when the budget was approved by the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen?
The budget numbers were, I guess, in the 2020 and the 2020 budget year. They were part of the salary line of the first selectman.
So fiscal year 1920, the budget that was approved contained these bonuses totaling $32,000?
That's correct, right? Yes.
Okay. So could you, and I asked for it at the last meeting, so I'd assume it's been prepared, and I had followed up in writing in early August. Could you just break down for me that line item? So I think it was about $206,000. Could we just break down like what was actually part of that line item?
And the line item was my salary,
which is 93 something.
93,280.
Okay,
Kimball Thor's salary of 72,642.
okay,
The emergency management director of $32,000.
Yep.
The board of selectmen stipend, $10,000, and I think also there was a salary increase of mine, and that was eventually taken out. So
okay. So that was the entire balance. So I didn't hear bonuses, though, in that description.
the bonuses were part of that regular salary line item.
Okay, but the numbers you just gave me, I think, add up to the total of the amount budgeted. It was the 207. So you gave me 93, 72, 32, and 10, roughly, which is the totality of that line item that was budgeted.
We're talking
and
about
approved.
the fiscal 2021 budget, correct?
I'm
Right.
talking about the 1920 budget, the one that these bonuses were paid out. Because these bonuses were paid on June 23rd, which was fiscal 1920.
Correct. At that time, we had the salary for the emergency management director included. I think the budget was approved in May of 2019. Is that correct? And our current emergency management director was still employed. I think he was terminated back in June, I think,
September.
late June.
I think it was August or September, I recall.
September,
September.
Yeah.
Okay.
after I had my surgery.
At that time, we kept that in the salary line because we were going to replace that position. When it turned out we elected to have Glenn Reynolds come in as the temporary emergency management director, pending approval in terms of him addressing the specifics that were involved in that job description. Then we had $32,000 left over, which I used to pass out bonuses.
Okay. So then it would be accurate to say when the budget was adopted by the selectmen of the Board of Finance, there were no bonuses included in that line item because it was the emergency management director, who we did not know at the time was going to be terminated 4 months later.
Correct.
Okay. I want to just clarify the record.
But they were not specifically addressed as bonuses. That's correct.
Okay. As far as there's a lot of conclusions. I see the report. I mean, it clearly has your name on the front. It has the town seal and letterhead, but you prepared this report, correct?
I prepared that in conjunction with Mike Marinaccio and Brian Wissinger. There was
Okay.
a lot of data involved.
Yes, and the data is very well presented, I will say that.
I apologize for the delay in presenting that, but it took a lot of information, a lot of time to put that together.
Well, I think the 4 or 5 days we received it was adequate time, but I think it had a lot of good data, so it was worth the extra time to make sure that it had all that data in it, so thank you for that. But
You're welcome.
as far as the conclusions in here, that there were no violations, whose conclusions are those?
And that was indicated by the town attorney, and I think his letter is included in
So
the package.
I'm just reading through the letter, and I see here in the report that I assume you wrote, it says there was no violation of laws, state statutes, town charter, town ordinance, or ethic rules. So that's the section you wrote here under bonuses, right?
Yes.
Okay. But I'm reading the town attorney's letter, and I'll just read a couple excerpts for time. Reviewing this general language would be my opinion, salary administration is a function of the board rather than the first selectman. However, absent clear authority in the charter or elsewhere, I cannot say unequivocally the first selectman violated any specific charter provisions by setting the salary of town employees. Down at the bottom it says, as to bonuses, it's not clear whether the first selectman has the authority to award bonuses at all. Even if such authority exists, I believe it may set an undesirable precedent. And I read this letter 3 or 4 times after reading your conclusions, and the only conclusion I see him saying is that there was no violation of the charter, and that is only because the charter is not specific. He said the language is vague. I don't see the town attorney opining that there's anything in regards to ethics, to state statutes, or to ordinances. I don't see that. I mean, if it's in the letter, please point it out to me, because I don't.
We had
I
a
don't see
meeting,
it mentioned.
myself and Mike Marinaccio and Carl Andolino, and he basically stated that.
But he did not put it in writing.
Well, I understand, but I'm just passing on. what
Well,
the
does it
data
say
is.
in there anywhere, Bill, that Andolina came to the conclusion that laws, ordinances, regulations were violated?
I think that it was I don't want to speak for the town attorney. I don't think that's appropriate. But I'll
No,
tell
it's-
you,
You're
my
reading from the
opinion-
letter. I
Yes.
don't think that there's anywhere in there, but where it states affirmatively that
I would agree. I think it is left silent, because I think it was a limited scope. I don't think he did a full investigation, and I don't think he had all the facts when he wrote the letter. And I don't know I don't know what the engagement was either. I'm not sure what engagement we asked him to perform.
Well, I happen to disagree with that, Bill. We did present all the facts to Attorney Landolina when we had the meeting with him. We had a subsequent meeting also with our town labor attorney. We did present the facts which were included in here.
Okay.
His letter obviously is a typical attorney's response, excuse me, Mike, in terms of trying to thread the needle here. But as far as I'm concerned, his opinion said there was no violation.
Okay. I wish the town attorney was here to state that, because we don't have that in writing. I would feel a lot more comfortable if he, maybe you could ask him to do that in writing for our next meeting, just so that we would have it. I had a couple questions as well about some of the timeline.
Bill, if I may, Tim Patricia,
Yes.
Board of Selectmen, I can tell you that I was interviewed by Carl Landolina on the phone before he drafted that letter, so I did have input into the research that he did.
Okay, thank you.
He talked to me as well.
Thank you. Okay,
And to me.
thank you. But I don't have anything that says his opinion that there were no violation of ordinances, ethics, or state statutes. Reading strictly his letter, it just says the charter. There was no violation.
He didn't ask me those questions.
Okay,
He asked me what it was like and what was occurring when we were there, when I was a selectman.
okay.
That's not something a lawyer, any lawyer, and in defense of lawyers, anybody who knows a little bit about municipal law or criminal law is not going to say there was a violation. That's for a jury to decide or a judge to decide. A lawyer could say there's probable cause for a finding of a violation, but Carl doesn't say that either.
And Mike, I would very strongly agree with you, and I think it's just worth pointing out the statements, the assertions that were made here and verbally were that there was no violation, and I don't think we've said either way. I don't think we've said there are, I don't think we've said there's not.
And he also doesn't recommend a further investigation or review, which to me is silent again, and seems that he's done. And that's up to us to decide.
Yeah, I agree, in the Board of Selectmen.
Yeah, to respond to your comment, Bill, that was my interpretation of his letter as well as the discussion we had with him on a personal basis.
Okay.
Jim, can I say something? I read through the attorney's letter several times, and I think that there's some good points in here about modifying things that are in the current plan, let's say. And among them, it says that the Board of Finance needs to determine its role in setting salaries. And one of his recommendations here was perhaps for elected officials that should be there, because you don't want an elected official voting for themselves. It just doesn't feel right to begin with. So maybe that is something that we as a board should consider. And I also believe that in this particular case, it says action is to avoid these situations in the future. Maybe you should just do away with bonuses, because it could be problematic, and I kind of agree with that as well.
Well, I think that is all up to the selectmen. As far as evaluating each of people's salaries, we got into that in the past, and it's just it's a really nightmare, because I don't know how these people perform. I don't know anything about. I probably couldn't even describe their job descriptions, half of them. So I'm in no hurry. I think the rest of this board is in any position to really judge a salary increase, a bonus, or have on an individual basis.
Well, then I would adjust that to say that perhaps what might happen is that when there's an opening, or when there's, I don't know how to say this exactly, but I think that we have to set a cap for what it should be. I was in very large company, but I knew that there was a level at which I couldn't go beyond it.
Individually?
Individually,
I don't have
you
any
know,
problem with that.
I was a director, I was a senior director, but I knew that was going to be top it off. And I think if we could help with them, or if they came up with that plan, it would be
fine.
easier to live with.
That's
I
fine.
think, I agree with you, Jim. I think who gets a bonus and how much it is should be the province of the Board of Selectmen.
Correct.
We
I don't
should,
mind the bonus. I'm
we
talking
shouldn't
about
be
the
involved
salary.
in that decision-making at all. I think the first selectman is the town manager and runs the town, and he, with the advice of the other two selectmen, ought to make those decisions.
I think we've already come to that conclusion.
I think there ought to be, maybe there ought to be a line item in the
Right.
budget for bonuses.
Kathy's idea of
Employee
capping it out is
compensation.
fine on an
Yeah.
individual basis. I don't,
That I would be okay with.
capping it out on an individual
Absolutely.
basis, I don't have any problems with.
So maybe instead of putting it under town, like, emergency management, we put it under bonus, or put the
Yeah.
$32,000 there.
I'd just like to add something here. I think that bonuses are very unusual in government. They're
Definitely.
common in the private sector. I think that's one of the problems we have here. We're sort of confusing. It's making this look like we like the private sector or we government. And point out to the other towns that give bonuses on an annual basis.
Sure.
I'd be surprised to hear that.
Yeah, I would disagree with you, Judge, because I've handed a couple out under the COVID in the state of Connecticut for people who are manning the help desk and, bringing up laptops.
I'm talking about communities.
Yeah, they're around in the federal government, they have been for years, and we did it. I was part of the selectman crew that initiated that, and it was because not everybody operates the same. People work
I'm
hard and
talking
they do
about
extraordinary work.
Community government.
And I'm explaining to you why that decision was made. It doesn't mean you have to agree with it. I'm
Okay.
telling you the history of how that decision was made. And I tend to agree that it's the right decision to hand out if the budget works in that direction, that people get a little extra if they've done extraordinary work.
I think this is a topic for discussion with the Board of Selectmen,
Yeah.
and we'll reach a conclusion as to whether or not they want to include that as bonus or incentive pay, or whatever the case may be.
I'd like to just point out, do people work differently on the municipalities versus general corporate environments?
Yeah, many different incentives, absolutely.
So then that should probably be,
Consideration, yeah.
The whole purpose of this discussion, and sure, I agree with Selectman Tim Keeney, it's different in municipal government. God, I've learned that full well versus the corporate world. I try to bring some sort of semblance to this municipal government operation on the basis of performance appraisals and salary administration, midpoint, et cetera, what other comparative towns are doing in terms of salary, so we won't overpay people. But recognizing that, we may have to make some adjustments, whether it's incentive or bonuses or whatever the case may be. So I'm open to that. We've discussed that openly between Tim Patricus and Tim Keeney. So
And so this one other thing, you were talking about bringing that to charter revision.
no, I'm not talking about that.
Well, not that, but you did mention about the whole system formulated, maybe go to, I think if you did an ordinance, it would be better than trying
Well,
to go to a charter.
The Board of
revision.
Selectmen is discussing that, whether the best approach would be a policy or an ordinance or a charter revision. And I think we're going to discuss at this
I would-
Thursday's meeting.
I would tend to keep it out of the charter. I mean, how detailed is the charter going to
Yeah.
be? You should manage this, I believe, through policies and procedures, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the charter process is gonna be at least 13 months.
Yeah.
By the time we get started and get
Right.
finished, and it
I
requires
think
a
you're going
ballot.
to change it again.
This bonus thing is not rocket science. I mean, you guys can figure out how you want to do it, the
Sure.
three
I think
selectmen.
we do that.
You can figure out how you want to do it, and I think the only piece for the Board of Finance is lay it out as a separate line item, so we
Right.
know
We have
what's
reached,
there.
we've reached out to our
Yeah.
labor attorney to basically give us some input and recommendations in terms of a policy, a strong policy, or whatever the case may be, applicable to the elected officials versus the current salaries that are in town hall. So we'll get his input also and discuss this in detail with my colleagues.
I think it's also important to look at our other policies and procedures and make sure that there are no shortcuts or there's a little bit more policing done with, just in case there is. I'm not saying there is or there isn't, but take a look at your whole policy procedures and how it's maintained and who guards it and who makes sure that all the checks and balances are there.
I think that's what's happened with this process, which I support. And we can tighten these things up.
Yeah.
I think if we can do that appropriately with either policies or ordinances, whatever the case may be.
Selectman Patricus just brought that issue
And I
up.
probably think you should take it out of the employee manual, because that was something that was probably dreamed up when you and I never knew about it, because the charter revision was made, but I don't recall.
Well, there were a
that
lot
at
of
all.
issues that we didn't know about in the
That's
past,
correct.
as you're aware. So
I mean, I would like to see the finance board, and we can have the discussion in the later part of the meeting, but I would like to see us invoke the statute that the town attorney mentioned, as far as exerting some of our authority over internal controls and things. because obviously with leaving it up to town hall staff, it broke down in this case. In 10 years from now, I want to make sure that we have something, even if it's not an ordinance, even if it's not a charter change, but we have something as the board. We invoke that, I think it's 7480 or whatever that statute is. I probably butchered it, and make some rules. And I have a few proposed rules, and we can have that discussion. I did have a couple other clarifications on the report, if it's okay to ask.
Sure.
I see, but I just looked through the timeline that you presented, and I see a lot of mention over, the memo that came from the town employee, the selectmen's meeting, how it was questioned at the July 16th selectmen meeting, and then the coverage, like from NBC Connecticut and some of the other media outlets. I know you mentioned me in there by name a couple of times.
No, I didn't mention your name at all.
My name is
Oh, I'm
mentioned a
sorry.
few
I
times.
apologize.
Actually many times. You had a chance to speak to the media, right? NBC and others reached out to you for comment, and you declined comment?
I did.
Okay. And I think they reached out to the CFO as well. I just want to make sure it's fairly reflected in here, that the chance was given to rebut anything. Most everything cited were things from the meeting that they took. Most every
Right.
quote, most everything was just from the public meeting. So I think, just to make sure we're fair, they did reach out, and comment was declined.
They would
How
have probably
would
lied
you know
about
that?
Because the story said it.
Sorry, said that.
They said it right in the story. I watched the story again. After I saw my name mentioned, I went and reviewed all the coverage.
I was on vacation when he reached out to me, so I didn't.
Okay. Yeah, no, it said, if you want to watch the story, it was mentioned right in the story.
You never know what's fair, what goes on the television. You don't believe that anymore.
I think, the July 27th note, I'm not sure exactly its relevance here. It says, with no prior review or knowledge of other members, board member Bill Meyer presents and distributes a draft memo. It's presented as a fact. And do you know for a fact that I did not speak to any other members before the meeting?
No, I didn't know that, but all I know is that when you presented that, there was an emotional discussion about that. I assume that was not. I could ask your board of selectmen colleagues, or the finance colleagues, were you aware of that presentation before we made it?
I think the question would be, I feel strongly it's important to follow the process. And the process I'd like to see followed is I present the letter to an open meeting and then have the discussion in public, which I think is what FOI and other rules would require. So I just wanted to clarify, just because I saw my name mentioned in here so many times, just some of the facts.
What we try to do, Bill, was present all the information, okay? And that includes Channel 3, the discussion we had here, our discussions with the attorneys, et cetera. Sorry, Joe.
Okay.
I don't want to dissect the past, and you did, and we didn't. I think we came up with a good conclusion as far as what our policies and procedures and where we're going from here. What has happened, happened. What is true is true. What is false is false. We could sit here all night going through and dissecting this thing, but I don't think it's going to do any good. Apologies are presented on the table. I think everybody's, clearly had no personal vendettas to lay forward or anything like that. But we do have a mission to do, and that's to clean up these policies and procedures. And what happened, happened. And I, as a board chairman, also apologize for anybody who feels as though they were offended or anything like that. But I think it's time to move on and go from here.
Well, he answered all my questions. so
Okay,
thank you.
good.
Yeah, I was done. Anyway.
Okay, great. Thank you, Bill. All right. Is that appropriations is next? Oh, no, the acceptance of the letter. I'm sorry. Do I hear a motion to accept the letter from our town attorney, Carol Landolina, dated August 20th, 2020?
So moved.
Do I hear a second? Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Discussions related to the... Right, I think we already had that. Appropriations and transfers.
Do we want to take any action though on that? Is there anything today? I don't know what the board feels.
I think that's,
On the
I
letter,
have
on
nothing
the attorney's
specifically to
letter?
act on. I mean,
Discussion
we,
relating to.
generally, I think we've given them marching orders, and
I think it should be.
when they've come over to some
Maybe a
conclusion.
timeline, 90 days, 45 days, 60
Well,
days?
we're going to discuss the whole process in terms of salary administration with the Board of Selectmen. We'll come up with a policy, a strong policy to address that.
I think it's already
mean-
on the agenda for.
Right.
I think if you're gonna have bonuses, I think at a minimum, it should be a line item.
I have no problem with that.
And I don't think there's any problem with that. I don't think anybody has a
Right.
problem.
And to cap them out, like Kathy said, that's fine, you know, I mean, not, everybody's gonna get 1,000% bonus based on the whole line item.
You know, we look at the approved budget, let's say, for salary increases. That could be split up between incentive payments or salary increases, so long as it doesn't exceed that budget line. I think that's something the Board of Selectmen will make a determination on, whether or not to include it as a way to compensate or not. I have no problem with that.
I mean, I would have a few recommended things that this board look at in addition to what the first selectman, actually a lot of mine overlap, but I would briefly just list off a couple of things. I don't think any of it's going to be particularly controversial. I mean, number one, I would recommend that we obtain, and I can send this as a follow-up.
Yeah, why don't you just send it? And they
Well, I
can
want to
have-
just read it out in the meeting, just so that we understand what I proposed, and then, you know, if there's anyone wants to have discussion, that's fine. If we want to act on it, that's fine, but I want to at least just read out what I'm proposing.
Okay, but it's gonna be the selectmen's proposal that comes to us, not yours.
No, but I just some things that I would like the selectmen, since they're sitting here in the room, to think about, if they're the ones coming up with the proposal for how this board is going to operate. So I'd like to make sure that we obtain comprehensive budget details that break down the objects by line item, like we've discussed. You know, every individual salary. For instance, like Todd, if he's going to buy salt, I want to see salt in the budget. You know, things like. I don't want to get down to the detail. Salt's a big dollar item. You know, something. You know, fuel, things like that, or some big dollar. We don't need to get to every pen, every pencil, but we need more detail than we have now, so that there's no surprises. And it protects everyone. It protects everyone.
I know, yes.
Create a system of rules and procedures along with internal controls and checks and balances for financial transactions, making our directors more involved in their budget and presenting the info to us and the board directly. Like I'm told, for instance, the directors don't have a lot of input into some of the transfers and things right now. You know, having them involved, it's another check and balance. Getting information in advance of the meeting so that we have time to prepare. I know a lot of times I walk in and the stuff is on my desk. I have not gotten to look at it before the meeting. You know, having it a week in advance would be very helpful. I think everyone agrees on these things. Matching expenses with accounts for the Board of Selectmen payment authorizations. Again, it falls under the purview of the Board of Selectmen, but it's something I like to watch as a member of the Board of Finance. You know, where's the money being spent and then what accounts it's coming out of. Again, I'm not deciding if they're buying a Ricoh or a Canon copier. That's up to the people on the ground. But just to have a general idea of where we sit. Getting approval for transfers before they happen. Now, it's not always feasible. Sometimes there's an emergency. It may be done at the next meeting. The Board of Selectmen meets every other week. You know, getting the information directly from department heads and then holding them accountable for their budgets. And then finally, I'd like to receive reports on where the discretionary CIP money is spent. I know that it says in the rules that the report is given, although my understanding is that it's not always given. You know, the $25,000 in discretionary CIP every year, I'd like to see that report given to the full board so we know exactly where the money was spent and what it was spent on. So, again, just some simple things. I mean, please disagree with me. I don't know that any of these are particularly controversial. I think they're pretty simple and common sense. And I would like to see some of these going forward.
I'm sure the selectmen will consider them, yeah, that's good. If you can just, you know, give your report to them, or actually give your if you may not have already given your list to them, that I'm sure they'll incorporate it in their recommendations to the Board of Finance. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, appropriations and transfers.
So I assume everybody got the transfers in
Anybody
their
have any
email
specific
then?
questions? Not seeing them?
Yeah.
I didn't go in my email.
Mike sent them out, so I assume he sent them to both email addresses. I'm
No,
not
just to the
100%.
big one. I
It's
didn't
gonna
do
have
it.
both email addresses during this transition period.
Oh, okay. I don't have
I
copies.
did get them, and I have my copy, I don't know if it helps, but I did get them, and I would say, Brian, I assume you prepared these, Brian, I'd say thank you very much.
Yeah, I've
They were
prepared
very
these
helpful.
3 times now. I'm tired of preparing these.
Well, it answered all the questions I had. I mean, I know I had a lot of
Yep.
questions, and I think that this was well done and thorough, and I think it answered all my questions. I mean, if anyone else wants to look at them, I have it.
Get it.
Yeah, and if you want to look at the actual line items, I can pass them around if you want to look at them ahead of time for a minute or two also.
And I certainly understand there's cases, I mean, in every government where we're gonna go over budget, and I'm fine with that. Just knowing what caused it to go under over budget was my point in the last meeting.
Yep.
And I think these explanations give it to us. So thank you for that.
That's very good.
Okay, does anybody have any questions in relation to the appropriations and transfers?
Make a
Sir?
motion to accept them as
So I
presented.
hear a second?
Second,
Any further discussion?
I just have a question. What's the total of the transfers?
There really is no total. I didn't total up the individual cells. If you give me a minute, I can pull up the spreadsheet. I can total it for you if you want that number. I normally just go by grouping.
I don't know
400,000 or
where we
500,000
kind of got away from this, but we used to see appropriations and transfers probably when the pre-charter revision more frequently, and it did two things. One, it cut down on all the questions that, well, when we have a huge list like this, you kind of go through them slowly, and you kind of address them slowly, and you try to address them meeting by meeting.
that's a good idea.
Yeah, I think we kind of got away from that. And not only that, if we do have a problem with some sort of emergency spending or some sort of overage, we'll know right away, not 6, 8, 12 months down the road, and I think
Yeah.
that's important.
Well, let me just address that. I think I can put together a procedure on that. What we had done when I started here was and other towns had done this, that's why I adopted it, was that if those transfers were within a department and didn't affect the entire budget, then we allowed the directors to move the money within the budget. If it was a major transfer, like town transfer station needed funds, yes, that comes to this board. Big time transfers that aren't available, monies aren't available at the time, would come in front of this board throughout the year. So many towns have it that there are certain levels in the
Right.
procedure within the
The
director
department
can do
itself,
it.
yeah,
If it's beyond, but it's not
I agree.
beyond 10,000,
Yeah.
then the CFO and the selectmen can.
That's
And then if it's beyond that, then you gotta bring it to the Board of
Exactly.
Finance
exactly.
during the year for the appropriate transfer approval.
But Mr. Chairman, I would agree with your point, and I think if you look at, these are some big dollar transfers. I mean, we have 150,000, we have 78,000, just in certain, and I think those do need to come to this board.
A little more frequently.
You know, a $1,000 transfer, I don't get as concerned about as, a $50,000 transfer. And to wait till the end of the year, I agree wholeheartedly with what you said.
I haven't dug that out, but I mean, there used to be a clause within the charter that says if you go ahead and do something that you're not supposed to do, you could be held, we never invoked it, but you can be held
That's right.
personally liable for it. I don't know if that's in there.
It's not that big.
It is there. It is there.
15,000.
Yeah, so it protects our employees and everything, and also gives us a little bit more depth as to what's being, transferred and appropriate, transferred. So. All right.
The total, Parker, is $507,966.64.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's going out. What's coming in?
That's
I know.
that's on each side.
All right.
507,966.
Do I hear a motion to?
We got the
accept-
motion in second.
Oh, I'm sorry. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
I got one other thing actually on appropriations, and I meant to tell Mike about it so he can send it out to you guys, and it's up to you whether or not you want to take any action on it tonight or not. After speaking with the auditors in late July, I think it was after the Board of Finance meeting on the 27th, I spoke to them as far as how we should handle the COVID expenses, since they were above and beyond the original budget. They recommended appropriating the funds with the offsetting revenues being the grants coming in from FEMA and the state of Connecticut.
That was bad.
So at the August 6th Board of Selectmen meeting, I presented all of the information on the COVID expenses. The total is $65,042.02. The Board of Finance would have to approve that appropriation so that we could clear up the books on that as well.
Oh, this is for the prior fiscal year?
This is for the fiscal 20 years.
Okay.
That's the state of Connecticut?
That 65,000 is being reimbursed between FEMA and the state of
That's
Connecticut.
what they
75% from FEMA, 25% from the state of
Because
Connecticut.
today
That's
in
why I
the
questioned
past,
that number, yeah.
it was
So you're-
crazy. It said 38,000
You
was
use
coming
town
in.
meeting for
That's
that.
I think that's the CARES Act or something. I think that's
Right.
different.
It was
Brian,
really
do we need a
worrying.
town meeting for that?
If you prolong it, yes, you will. If you do it under emergency actions before September 30th, you do not.
Brian,
Is there
can
any
you
other
add-
stuff that's coming in?
Can you add an agenda item to the special meeting here?
No, you
It was
cannot.
on the,
It's
on the-
under
on the
transfers and
agenda.
appropriations.
Right.
On the agenda.
Yeah, so you're coming to us with an additional appropriation.
Yeah,
Basically, that's not on this sheet.
For last year.
right.
That's
It's not on the transfers because it's a separate
Right,
thing.
okay.
It's not a transfer.
And that is it for 2020?
That is it for
That is it.
2020.
Okay, so, what were the numbers, Brian? I'm sorry.
$65,042.02, and that was our COVID-19 expenses.
$65,042.02?
Yep.
Okay, do I hear a motion to go to town meeting and to select, and to pass the, recommend to the selectmen that we go to town meeting to transfer $65,042.02
Appropriate.
to appropriate,
Do you want to go to a town meeting, or do you want to do it under the governor's executive
You
order?
have
Oh, I
until
see.
September 30th.
Okay, that's right. Okay,
Yeah,
okay,
you
okay,
can
okay.
executive order.
Well, let's have them sign off on it too, right?
Yeah.
They've already signed off on it.
Oh, they have?
The
Okay.
selectmen approved it on August 6th.
So we're good.
So you guys just have to approve
We
the
have to
Okay, so,
approve
do I hear a motion to approve the
So
appropriation?
moved.
Second.
Is it appropriation when you don't go to town meeting?
It's what?
Is it an appropriation when you don't go to the
It's
town?
an appropriation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That'll be offset by a receivable.
Right.
Because we're
That'll
trying
take
to
it.
receive it.
Months.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Well,
Yeah.
we'll take months, and then once we get the federal receivable, then we can apply for the state one, and then we'll be whole.
Yeah.
Does this include the Board of Ed as well, or is this?
Yeah,
Yes.
the Board of Ed, we don't approve them here. They've actually already
But they're
submitted
in
their
that total
expenses.
figure.
They're not part of that total.
Or not.
They're not?
No,
Okay.
they're
Oh my
not
God.
part
But
of
Board
that.
of Finance would get the
Oh,
Board of
that
Ed as
makes
well,
sense.
because we would have final authority, unless it's still within their budget?
It's within their budget. Their reimbursable is within their budget, yes.
Okay. And Brian, I would also just say thank you for putting this together. I know this is an enormous amount of work trying to track this, and thank you for all you've done to maximize reimbursements for the town.
Do they have that September 30th deadline also?
What's that?
Do they, the Board of Education have that?
Board of Ed has already submitted their application.
And
They
they're
submitted
aware
all
of
their
it.
stuff to me. Theirs actually went
Okay.
very quickly through FEMA because it was pretty straightforward.
Mm.
Ours, on the other hand, with insurance reimbursements for ambulances, and there's been a lot of back and forth. And so FEMA and I have got it down to this number. So,
Okay, all in favor say aye to the
Aye.
motion.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Do I hear a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Sure.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very, very much, everybody.
I just need somebody to sign these.
I don't think they're gonna make the night.